Am I real? Are these hands that are my hands truly my hands? How can I be sure that I'm not just a sentient camera with two lenses? Have you ever pondered these questions? Well, if you have, today's game is perfect for you. It's called Soma, a sci-fi horror title that was released back in 2015 by Frictional Games, the same team that brought us Amnesia: The Dark Descent in 2010, aka the game that birthed a trillion YouTube screams. Since then, Frictional's been pretty consistently enduring memory loss, and it would seem that even when they ventured into this game, they couldn't quite get away from the traumatic brain injuries, as our hero, Simon, has recently endured a devastating car crash. Also, apparently Frictional was worried that you too are suffering from amnesia, as they've decided to watermark every gameplay recording on PS5. Never seen a game do this before, and thanks, but I hate it. Regardless, Simon wakes up in your standard apartment, receiving a call from a man named Dr. Munchie. He reminds us of our brain appointment we have with him today, and also about drinking something called tracer fluid before we head off.
It feels like milk, but the taste, it's like sucking on a penny.
Delicious. That done, we hop on the subway for a minute, getting a call from our friend and boss. It would seem that, just like in real life, we are very popular. The boss asks if we're gonna make it in today, but we tell him about the scan as we arrive at the doctor's office. Looks like Munchie runs a real tight ship around here, since there's no one to greet us, and we have to steal the code to unlock the door. From what I understand, this is a common practice in the business world these days, which is why I always add skilled at breaking and entering to all my job applications. Luckily, Munchie doesn't seem to mind, as he's eager to get his experimental brain treatment underway. Essentially, he's going to be scanning our brain to digitize it and run computer simulations to see if he can fix us by experimenting on that digitized brain with different stimuli. Sounds fancy, but looks more like high-tech VR. Wonder if it can play Skyrim. Unfortunately, we may never know, as he runs the scan and we wake up in somewhere. Confused, we act out in anger by breaking a window and climbing out to find a haven of metal. We search around for a bit, discovering some hanging robots, as well as a device called the Omni tool, pretty much just a key. Big, bulky cell phone key. This? It's a little too subtle. I've been thinking we head in this direction. You know, might have to redesign pockets, but I think we'll get there. Either way, we update the thing and continue on our merry way. It's dark, everything is broken or breaking, and apparently we're in Rapture. Wait, no. This is Soma. Thank God for that watermark. Exploring the area, we find a robot covered in black goo and hooked up to a computer terminal. Unfortunately, she's sucking up all the power, so we remove her tubes and...
I need it. Why? I was okay. I was happy.
Well, I do not feel good about that. It would seem that these robots have feelings, are sentient. But, I mean, they are just robots, right? Fortunately, we don't have to think about it too hard, since we get a distraction in the form of a call from a woman from Site Lambda. She seems a bit confused. We also seem a bit confused. Hell, I'm even a little confused. She tells us to get to the comm center because the signal where we are is shoddy, and so we head off to do just that. Along the way, we find a moldy robot who doesn't seem as passive as the last one, and another one named...
Carl Semke,
who seems to think he's human. Silly robot. Allow me to silence you with electricity. Alright, well, that didn't work. Regardless, we search the place a little more, finding an employee ID in a locker, which we input into the computer to unlock the comm center. Ascending the stairs, we find some documents about the end of the world, morbid, as well as a stronger radio to re-establish connection with the woman from earlier, who introduces herself as Catherine. We share a quick little back and forth before the roof starts to break and she tells us to find her at Site Lambda. Water rushing into the room as we panic, but it's okay. We were wearing a diving suit the whole time? Wait a minute. Are we a robot? I'm thinking we might be, but we may as well head to Lambda for a second opinion. Following a path lit by underwater street lamps, we find a little robot buddy and rescue him, breaking our track record of robot torture. Good thing we did too, as he lasers open a door that was welded shut, allowing us access to the site's underwater rail system. It needs power, but when we go to do a search for the fuse box, we instead find a survivor.
Can I help?
It won't let me die. Nothing is allowed to die.
Well, now that you mention it, I can help with that. Not even a thank you? Come on, lady. With another death at our hands, we managed to get the railcar system operational. And it crashes. I'm starting to think that underwater cities just aren't really viable. Catherine calls in to tell us to hoof it, as we find a maintenance shaft leading back out into the open ocean. We take a brisk little 20,000 leagues jog over to Lambda, finding that there be monsters here. But, more importantly, Catherine's a frickin' robot. A broken one at that. Do you know what I do to robots around here, Kath? Hell, I've been struggling to help out humans. Undeterred, she delivers the unfortunate news that we too may be less than human, but Simon doesn't want to think about it, agreeing to help her out as long as she closes her speakers. Noticing that we have a high-tech key, she decides that she'd like to live in it. So we take it over to a terminal and insert a chip that gives us a Catherine key. Stupendous. With her new body acquired, Catherine begins spilling the beans on what exactly she was doing here. Seems that she is an AI created from a brain scan of her human self while she was attempting to create a so-called ARC project.
My project? Oh, well, I saved all the people on the station as brain scans and put them into an artificial world. We were going to launch it into space to save it from, all of this.
She asks if we can help find out if human Catherine ever finished the project, which she did, but didn't get the chance to send it into space. Simon asks if we were able to make it to the Ark, could we upload our consciousness and launch it into space to be in paradise with a crew for eternity. Catherine says that it's theoretically possible, but the trip is going to be grueling. However, we don't exactly have much going on, so what the hell? Time for an odyssey. We pick up the Cath key and head out, attempting to use a little emergency vessel that's broken and being forced to continue training for that marathon. The path is littered with broken buildings reclaimed by the sea, and we decide to enter one to hopefully find an emergency vessel that's still functional. We do, but emergency locks are keeping it in place, meaning that we have to tangle with more naked lightheads. Regardless, we detach a few tubes from the reactors to destabilize the building, resulting in the locks releasing and a bit of backstory from Catherine. Seems these black goo tentacles are the result of something called the WOW, a site-wide AI system that malfunctioned and has been taking over the facility. For now, though, the intricacies of the goo will have to wait, as the reactor blows and causes our vessel to crash land, decommissioning Catherine and leaving us stranded. Fortunately, we've got friends in low places, as Robo Buddy comes through yet again to burst us out of the pod and release us back into the desolate ocean. Returning to the path, we check out a couple of waterlogged buildings before calling in a Zeppelin and reuniting with Catherine, who suggests we murder more robots.
Come on, I don't want to hurt anyone. Isn't this a bit much?
It's just a robot, Simon.
We're just robots. Sort of.
Look, I'm not exactly a pacifist, but I'm starting to feel like underwater Ted Bundy here. Regardless, we need that chip. But I will not take it from Robo Buddy. That means bad luck for you, only other robot in the vicinity. With the dark deed done, we return to Catherine to talk about morality. I'm not sure if she's exactly a master on the subject, but if we keep heading down this path, I'll have a body count in the triple digits, so who am I to judge? She tells us that the robot sacrifice was necessary, before the subject shifts to Simon's acceptance of the fact that he himself is post-human. They talk about what it means to be a robot. Catherine is rather laissez-faire on the subject, but Simon's having trouble coming to grips. The conversation running its course as they arrive at Site Theta in hopes of using what's known as the Dunbat, essentially a super powerful submersible craft that will allow them to reach the location of the Ark. Unfortunately, the entire area has been quarantined, leading to us needing to find a security cipher to lift the protocol. We search the area for a bit, finding some rooms where the crew used to live, before finding Catherine's old offices and the birthplace of the ARC project. We also find the answer to how Simon wound up here, as his brain scan became a template for future AI. It's a heavy thing to process. So, let's just not and kill some more stuff.
Did we just bring that guy to life? I mean, he's a perfect scan, meant for the Ark. He's the real deal. And we turned him off.
With everyone at the station long since dead, or some version of that anyway, we're forced to resort to digging up a brain scan of one of the former employees and attempting to pry the details out of him. We take him to the beach and shut him off. We take him to the cabin and shut him off. Basically, we bring this guy into existence, trying to get him to divulge secret information, and if he doesn't, we kill him. I don't know if I've ever killed this much in a video game without combat. Regardless, we eventually find out that he was dating some girl on site, and Catherine wears her skin to trick him into feeling comfortable. God, I feel good about this. He tells us what we want to know, so we pull the rug out from under him, and Kath gives us the option to erase his existence entirely, or just shut down the computer. I mean, it's a hard decision, but I think I'll just shut down the computer in case I need to inflate those kill numbers later. Another dark deed done, we head back to the console we plugged Catherine into and pick her up to descend in the done bet. Unfortunately, it breaks. This is the future, isn't it? Cars that have panic attacks. With the done bat now a non-option, we begin searching for a way into Theta through the ventilation shafts. Hooking up Catherine to a new dashboard, we talk through our options, which now require that we head to Site Omicron to use something called the Climber to reach the submerged depths. First though, she wants to know what we're made of so that it'll be easier to transfer us onto the Ark.
No, hold on, back up. I'm one of your old colleagues?
Well, your body is. Imogen Reed.
That's disgusting.
And we're a freaky deaky cyborg. This may be the worst day of my life. It would seem that we're a computer that was shoved into the necular area of a woman named Imogen Reed. Simon's a little freaked out, but hey, if I don't murder those robots, who's gonna do it, am I right? We solve a little puzzle, hide from a shivering mold man, see what happened to the OG Brandon Wan, and eventually make it to the basement of the facility. The place is absolutely dripping with goo, and as we go to leave, we're picked up by a different mold man and shoved into the filthy substance. Boy, day's just not getting any better, is it, Simon? We have a hallucination with our girlfriend who died in the car crash before waking up back in reality. Cold, depressing, a robot-headed reality. Prying ourselves free from the goo, we search the facility for a while, evading mold monsters and opening doors, until we finally reach the basement of this basement. This whole damn building is a basement, come to think of it. Climbing some ladders and jumping some scaffolding, we come to a tube that lets us back out into the ocean very near Omicron. Unfortunately, the place is sealed up tight, so we enter the adjacent power building to hear Simon question the meaning of his new existence and flip some switches. If the highlight of my day was flipping switches, I'd probably be having an existential crisis as well, buddy, I get it. We eventually managed to flip the correct switches to boot up the system, but there's another problem. We need a code to gain access to the door lock. Now, where the hell are we gonna find— oh, there it is. Strange computer glitches aside, we enter Omicron's main facility to discover we still can't use the main door. Fortunately, there's a side door, and fortunately, we're the last one alive down here because I don't think this bridge would pass the next inspection. Inside Omicron, we find a gaggle of headless bodies and another dock for Catherine. Seems the suit that we need in order to withstand the pressure during the climber voyage is, occupied. Catherine's solution? Transfer us from one headless dead chick to the other. What's the difference, am I right? Simon's a little less than pumped about the concept, but the motto of the sea seems to be no other option, so looks like we're doing this. Before we can begin the procedure, though, we need to collect a few things around the station. A jar of WoW goo, a Cortex chip from another robot, and a battery. Looks like we run on Duracell. Who knew? We also get a little peep at the body beauty we're leaving behind. We look like a reject from the Destiny series. With all that scooped up, we head back to Cafe. Huh. That was weird, but okay. We're just gonna pretend like that didn't happen as we head back to Catherine for our body transfer. We get plugged in and prepped as Kath throws the switch and we wake up in Rayleigh Herber. Wait. Did we?
There must be something wrong. Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
What was that?
my sweet lord. Well, as it turns out, the mind transfer process isn't so much of a transfer as it is a copy. We're basically opening up a file explorer and creating a duplicate in another folder. Is that ethical? I'm gonna say probably not.
God damn you, Kath. 2 Simons? There can't be 2 Simons.
Fortunately, Catherine and Simon have a solution. Kill the other one. Bet you didn't see that coming. The choice is ultimately up to you. Kill old Imogen Reed Simon, or leave him to live a life at the bottom of the sea, cathless and alone. Both possibilities are so flowery, aren't they? You decide to leave him to his misery. Sure, he's a murderer and will probably wipe out the rest of the robo population if left unchecked, but I kinda like Simon. Maybe he can hotwire a whale and get to the surface or something, I don't know. Regardless, that's his problem now, as we pick up the cat in the box and head down to the climber. We plug her in to operate the thing, but the conversation's a bit stilted for some reason. Look, Catherine, I'm sorry I couldn't kill myself. What do you want me to say? Simon unloads some of his feelings as she quietly attempts to placate them, the barrage of unhappiness leading to a deeper conversation about the meaning of this new existence and if it's even worth fighting for. The power shuts off thanks to the pressure, and we turn it back on to lead to another fairly lengthy conversation about what it's like when Catherine isn't plugged into a terminal. A conversation that's interrupted by whatever the heck this thing is.
You did it! You did it! I will make preparations.
Huh. That was weird. Probably nothing though. With Tentacle Head receding back into wherever he's from, we reach the bottom of the sea and begin yet another underwater trek, this time to Site Tau. Picking up Catherine, we're struck with the intense pressure of the depths far below where the sun can reach. Fortunately, they've kept the lights on down here, as we follow the windy, inhospitable trail with monster fish lurking just out of eyeshot. We mess around with some machinery, explore an underwater mammoth spider cave, and eventually make it to town. The place has been deeply gooified, and has doors that have absolutely no respect for your time. Oh, and also monsters. Despite these difficulties, however, we eventually manage to find our way around the gooed-off corridors and stumble into the crew's quarters. Lots of depressing stuff to sink your teeth into, but the juiciest is that there's still a survivor. She's hooked up to a life support system and is clinging to the hope that another survivor from Omicron will come down here and take the Ark off her watchful hands. Let's break that hope, shall we?
You mean I'm the last living human on the planet?
I'm sorry.
Yep. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you are screwed. Look, I'll make you a deal. Let me take the Ark, and in exchange, I'll end your wretched existence. What do you say? She agrees to the offer, allowing us to take the Ark in the hopes that we'll launch it into space as intended, asking only that we stay with her as she fades into the afterlife. Here lies Sarah Lindwall, the final human standing. Well, in a matter of speaking. With her death, we take the Ark and head on our final voyage to the underwater space launching megagun in Site Alpha. We put the Ark on a conveyor track thing and attempt to follow it, but unfortunately the way is blocked. Also unfortunately, Tentacle Head's back. As we make our way through another cave and then the dilapidated ruins of Alpha, he tells us that he's taken a keen interest in our journey since our arrival at Omicron, asking us to kill the WoW and free the entirety of PATHOS-II from its tyranny. How do we do this exactly? Well, we feed it.
It's working!
Damn it! That's one of my biological pieces. I can't even get that one back. Then, to add insult to injury, Tentacle Head attempts to kill us, only to be eaten by a WoW worm. So maybe the WoW was actually the good guy? If only my first inclination to everything wasn't murder. Ah well. We escape out the side door as the remnants of the WoW system attempt to enact their revenge. A giant mechanical fish taking nibbles at us as we rush through the darkness towards the underwater space launching megagun building. We enter the area to find it surprisingly calm. Sure, there's goo tentacles, but I'm beginning to think that that's just a design choice. We plug Catherine into the terminal, and then we find Catherine on the floor. Seems human Catherine was beaten to death by one of her co-workers during a spat over whether or not to send the Ark into space. Are we going to get one mildly warm ending for these people? I feel like I'm a murderer who's vacationing at a puppy mill right now. But whatever. We find the Ark, load it into a jet bullet, and go to pick up Catherine one final time, taking her to the launch pad as she assures us that everything's been planned for. And then... No! Another freaking chair? Are you kidding me, Catherine? Unfortunately, the law of the sea is ironclad, as we once again have no other options. We sit in the chair, getting to play a nice little crane game to get the bullet into the space gun before Catherine tells us to hit the button.
What are you waiting for?
I don't know how, Catherine, and I don't know why, but somehow, you are gonna screw me here. We click the button and the upload process begins, both scans finishing just in the nick of time as the Ark launches itself into space. We did it. Wait, we're still here? Catherine tells us that this was always the plan. We sent a copy of ourselves into space, got unlucky on a 50-50 shot of who would go. She's content that in some form they'll live on amongst the stars, but Simon, well, he's a little less enthused.
Oh, fuck this! Fuck this! Fuck you! Fuck you, Catherine, you lied!
Well, how else was it gonna end? We're not exactly playing a game about Care Bears here. Fortunately, there's a bit of a silver lining, as a post-credit scene allows us to see things from the perspective of Copy Simon. He's found paradise, a beautiful world to explore with his newfound friend.
Catherine? Catherine!
And that's Soma. Pretty damn depressing, especially if you're Robo-Simon. To give a couple of quick thoughts before we get into some of the lore surrounding this game, I thought it was great. The story is hands down one of the most compelling that I can remember ever playing in a video game, but for me, the gameplay lacked something. You can tell that this game was made by the people behind Amnesia because they share a lot of similarities in the actual mechanics. You can walk, run, hide, and interact with objects. The differences being that, from what I remember about Amnesia, lighting played a big factor, while it's not really of note in this game. And then also there's no insanity meter like Amnesia either. The closest similarity being that the screen will kind of glitch if you look at an enemy, but from what I understand, there's no long-term ramifications. In fact, it's been questioned if this game even needed enemies, a question that the developers seemed to answer with a resounding no when they added safe mode as a difficulty option. Enemies will still exist in the world, but won't attack. I personally played this game in normal mode, but seeing as the main draw here is exploration of the world, if I come back to this game, it will definitely be in safe mode. I should also say that this game is in no way as scary as Amnesia. I remember being genuinely creeped out during my first playthrough of that game, and I had no such experience in this one. The setting is sci-fi horror, but the atmosphere is much more conducive to exploration than a tight horror focus. That all being said, my somewhat lukewarm reception to the actual gameplay pales in comparison to how much I was blown away by the story. Not only are the characters interesting and memorable, but the concepts are so fun and speak to an idea of AI that I've never seen explored before. Imagine that you go in for a brain scan one day, and then the next thing you know, you're waking up 100 years later, underwater, with no comprehension of time between the 2 points, and it's like you blink and you're in an entirely new world. Not only do we get the thought experiment of that, but we also get to muse on the idea of what it really means to be a human. What is consciousness? Are you your human body, or are you the summation of your memories, despite what form that may take? I've heard people talk about how we'll have sentient robots soon that will have advanced AI indistinguishable from a human, and then we'll have to have a discussion about robot rights. It's almost too foreign of a concept that my toaster could be smarter than I am, let alone have the same rights, but this game's approach is much more interesting and ethical dilemma in my opinion. These scans think they're human. They even have a lived experience that predates them becoming machines. So what exactly does that mean? Does your mind make you human, or your body? It's almost like you parse out a piece of your soul every time a version of you is created. Not only do they introduce these fascinating concepts, however, but they also toy with them through the dialogue in the documents. My two favorite examples being one, the group of people who kill themselves after receiving their scans, believing in the idea of continuity. Essentially, the concept that our bodies are in a constant state of flux, and thus this scanned version of yourself should be seen as the next level of evolution on that chain. People like Mark Saring killing themselves shortly after their procedure, so there are no divergent memories that escape the continuity of the you who will live on for eternity.
A continuous flow of thought and perception keeps an unbroken chain of continuity that we know as our self.
Then, my second favorite example is the Brandon Wanscan interactions on the computer terminal. I love this one because I've wondered about this before. Okay, do you ever wonder if there'll be a time in video games when the AI will be so advanced that you'll actually feel morally repugnant for killing them? Like, say you're playing Elder Scrolls 12 in the year, 3000 at the rate they're going, and the Dark Brotherhood gives you an assassination request, but come on, this guy has a digital family. How are his wife and daughter going to afford sweet rolls if you take him out? And with the Argonian economy being what it is these days, I mean, can you sleep tonight doing that? I've actually wondered that before, and the Brandon Wan encounter made me rehash it all over again. Except, it's worse, because he's actually a scanned person with feelings and emotions that were prodding with no regard for his existence whatsoever. It's basically like, you have Catherine, we like Catherine, but once you get to Omicron, she gets deleted for whatever reason, and so we just download another scan and act as if she's the same person. It's a wild concept, and I absolutely love that about this game. But at the risk of pontificating about how great this story is for too long, let's just dive into some of the actual events and see if we can't figure out what was going on around here. So to start with Simon, our main character, back during the events of his first life, he and his friend/love interest Ashley would get into a car wreck which would take her life and result in Simon having a devastating brain injury. Doctors didn't give him long to live, and so he would begin looking for alternative means of therapy, which would lead him to Dr. David Munchie. Munchie and his colleague had been working on an experimental new brain scanning device that he'd hoped to use as sort of a digital brain copy with which they could run infinite tests and eventually find a perfect treatment plan. Unfortunately for First Life Simon, this method would fail, and after only a handful of weeks, his condition would worsen to the point of bed rest and certain death.
I was supposed to save you.
Hey, you got my brain on file. Maybe you can put it to some use.
Yeah, who knows?
First Life Simon would pass away, but with his brain being one of the first ever scanned, he would become a legacy scan as the technology surrounding the concept began to grow. According to Catherine, legacy scans such as his would typically be used as a sort of learning tool for engineers getting into AI, meaning that Simon's probably been brought into existence and decommissioned hundreds, if not thousands of times over the decades. What a pleasant thought. Anyway, while Simon was stuck in digital limbo, over the course of the next almost century, the world around him would carry on. A site known as PATHOS-II would be established in the 2060s for the purposes of thermal mining, and something known as the Omega Space Gun would be developed there later as a cost-effective means of launching space probes and satellites. With the deep ocean being such a difficult-to-maintain biome, a site-wide AI would be created known as the WOW with the purposes of overseeing the facility and ensuring its prosperity. However, it's not an AI in the terms that you or I might typically associate with an AI. It has the ability to think, but it has no personality and acts to strict adherence to certain protocols. Its main duties would be things like maintaining climate and life support, but it would also be given structural gel with which it was meant to fix structural damage or excessive leakage. A man named Johann Ross being the overseer of this AI from Site Alpha, but the WOW's reach was facility-wide. And while, at first, everything seemed to be functioning as intended, this would all change when a comet known as Telos would strike the Earth on January 12th of 2103. The impact of this comet would absolutely decimate Earth, knocking out all communications between PATHOS-II and their surface contacts, presumably killing everyone who wasn't fortunate enough to be in such a closed-off enclave. For the workers who'd lost family and friends to the tragedy, it was devastating. But while they mired themselves in grief, the WOW redefined its purpose.
Since the comet crashed a few days ago, January 12th, the WOW has dropped to a low energy state. It hasn't abandoned its duties. It's keeping climate and life support going, but it's been simplifying the pattern, redefining its protocol.
Establishing a new protocol, the WOW would set a parameter of preserving humanity. However, there was an issue. Since the WoW was an AI, it didn't have a true concept of where to draw the line between what was human. Would a walking corpse constitute? How about a robot that thought it was still alive? With these skewed, uncertain foundations, the WoW would begin to enact its plans to safeguard the remaining population. It would change the composition of structural gel to something that acted almost as a cancer, ever expanding and allowing it to extend its reach to even the furthest corners of the facility. Using these far-reaching tentacles, it would adjust all pilot seats around the facility to operate as makeshift brain scanners anytime they were used, collecting these scans to ensure preservation should someone be lost. Once it was discovered what the WoW was doing, it would prompt an idea within one of the workers, a woman named Catherine Chun, to use a similar technology to create something that she would call the ARC Project. Resources down here were limited, and with the rest of the world presumably in flames, it meant that it was only a matter of time before conventional life could no longer exist. She would bring the concept to a few of her colleagues who loved the idea, and would begin building a digital world for all of their brain scans to inhabit, a utopia where a digitized version of the staff could live on for eternity, launched into space with the use of the Omega space gun to exist amongst the stars. Her project would become a rallying point for some of the survivors, but would also cause a division when some of the people sought to kill themselves after their scans, in line with a man named Mark Saring's idea of continuity. Meanwhile, the WoW had been continuing to overplay its helpful hand, which would strike fear into the heart of its overseer, Johann Ross. Ross was fearful of the WoW's new protocol would create a bastardization of the human race, so he would flee to Site Tau in the hopes of making it to Omicron and finding a way to kill it. Unfortunately, as he ascended the climber, he and his party would be attacked by fish that had been mutated by the WoW's influence, leaving his cohorts dead and himself in a coma. He would make it to the site, being held in a central containment cell, but would be unable to get out his message. Over the next couple days, the staff at Omicron would experience excruciating headaches from the company's standard black boxes inside their heads. They had no idea what was causing these migraines, but it was actually the WoW exerting control over the electromagnetic fields in an attempt to resuscitate Ross. These attempts would prove successful, saving the doctor from death, but he still hadn't awakened from his coma. However, surprisingly, the process would grant him a form of telepathy, which he would use to get into contact with a woman named Rayleigh Herbert. He would convince her to calibrate a vial of structural gel that was capable of killing the WoW, but before she could leave to administer it, the WoW would shriek, exploding the black boxes within the heads of everyone at Omicron and stunning Ross's attempts. Ross is also Tentacle Head, if you're wondering. He kinda just hangs out at Omicron until we come by, and then he uses his influence to get us to kill the WoW, which I personally did, but you have the option. You have several player choice options throughout the game, with the WoW perhaps being the biggest. Anyway, getting back to Catherine, despite the hardships and the deaths surrounding the Ark, she would finish the project and begin the approach to the Omega space gun with some of her co-workers. However, as they approached, they would begin to get cold feet if this launch was a good idea. The majority of the team fearing that the launch would be unsuccessful, with the Ark being destroyed in the ascent. Catherine, however, was steadfast, her desire to send humanity's final hope into the stars, a conviction that would get her killed.
I'm not gonna let you ruin this! Stop it!
Guys, calm down!
Get away from me! No!
What did you do?
It was an accident.
Catherine, talk to me.
With humans dropping like flies and the WoW working in overdrive to accomplish its protocol, it would continue its attempts to preserve life in perverse and strange ways. One of these methods resulting in the rebirth of Simon Jarrett, leading to the events of the game and to the completion of Catherine's ultimate goals. Now, of course, there are a million other little lore avenues we could go down. Each base kinda has its own catastrophes and series of events that resulted in its destruction. There's a lot of interpersonal relationships and conversations that are interesting, and there's even a short series on Frictional's YouTube channel that goes over events surrounding Imogen Reed and how she came to be the body for Simon to eventually inhabit. But for now, that's the gist of the story and the major relevant details. Like I said, I think the story is phenomenal, and one that I think will leave a lasting impression. Are there facets that are confusing? Absolutely. There's just so much going on that it's almost overwhelming to try and put the tale together on your own while you're playing through this game. However, all these details make the world feel so lived in that, to me, I welcome being a little lost. I guess it also helps to relate to Simon because he's basically a fish out of water. A funny analogy considering where the game takes place. Regardless, that's about all I've got to say on Soma. Excellent game with an intricate world and highly interesting concepts. Anyway, thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.